Took a vacation.
Yeah, that's gonna work. I told him to make sure. that-
Greg Davis.
Get ready to get inside. I don't say Sundays. Listen, I get up the speech. I look out the heart of this. And that's what I'm afraid of. I change my mind. Then people have to come, my God. Yeah.
Loud.
Over Jesus. We did not. Yeah, go back to living. Well, and at the end of the day, whether I guess yes or no, or whether you get it or not, we're gonna get up in this dais. We're gonna shake hands, we're gonna live it down here, continue to live it. That's right. Walk it up. Am I right? That's right.
I'd like to call to order tonight's Kokomo Common Council meeting for July 10th. We will have an invocation by Pastor Ramon Ogilvie from Great Faith Church. Would you all stand, please? And our pledge will be led by Councilman Dave Capshaw.
As we look to the Lord, our Father and our God, we thank you today for this opportunity to stand before this august body, the participants of a city well run. We thank you for the representation that you have before us to oversee the concerns and cares of our city so that we are well managed and well led. I pray, God, that you would allow this body to always keep a mind for advancement. I pray, God, that you would teach us and lead us to always be better, but teach us how to do it. I pray, God, that you would give us the abilities to set our sights of advancement on the sunlit summit of mountains or even the stars above. And although we may miss them from time to time, I pray, God, that you not allow us to set our eyes and our eye gaze upon a mud hole so that we hit it every time. Teach us what it is you would have us to know in this day. And then, God, grant us what it is you would have us have in this moment. And we give you glory and praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for liberty and justice for all.
I would now ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Councilman Capshaw.
Here.
Councilwoman Delon. Here. Councilman Tony Stewart.
Here.
Councilman Roger Stewart.
Here.
Councilman Greg Davis.
Here.
Greg, can you hear us?
I can hear.
Councilman Collins.
Here.
Councilwoman McKibben. Here. Councilman Riku.
Here.
And Councilman McGlick.
Here.
I would now entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the June 26th meeting.
I make a motion.
Second. We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I would ask, do we have any committee reports from our council? We'll go over again during the communications about the order that we'd like for the meeting to go tonight. Once again, we want to thank everyone who has sent emails and texts concerning an item on our agenda tonight. And that I've been informed that we probably have two speakers that would be speaking mainly for the group of individuals in the neighborhood. I would again ask that there would be, when the speakers should be respectful, no clapping and cheering or after any one of the speakers. I think that covers all that I want to talk about. I think I'm good. So again, just want to thank everybody for being respectful up to this point, and we'll continue with our meeting here. I would ask the clerk to read ordinance 7089 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7089 is case P09Z23, is the petition of Advantex Development Corporation. We can't say it. Requesting the City Plan Commission petition and recommend to the Kokomo County Council for a change in zone classification from an M1 to an M3 for property described or more commonly known as 1411 North Market.
Councilman Riku.
Mr. President, ordinance 7089 is a petition of Advantex Development Corporation requesting change in zone classification from MI moderate intensity industrial light manufacturing to M3 large scale multifamily residential for property described as 1411 North Market Street. I move for approval on second reading.
Second. Is there anyone communications from this ordinance? We have a motion and a second to pass ordinance 7089 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Would ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Capshaw,
Aye.
Micklick. Aye.
Aye.
Jalan. Aye. Riku,
Aye.
Tony Stewart.
Aye.
McKibben. No. Roger Stewart.
Aye.
Greg Davis.
Aye.
Ray Collins.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-1.
Motion carries 8-1. I would now ask clerk to read ordinance 7088 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7088 is case P08Z23, is the petition of Advantex Development Corporation requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an LI to an M3 for property described or more commonly known as 3109 West Sycamore.
Councilman Riku.
Mr. President, ordinance 7088 is a petition by Advantex Development Corporation for change in zone classification from LI Low Intensity Industrial Business Park to M3 Large Scale Multifamily Residential at property located at 3109 West Sycamore. I move for approval on second reading.
I second.
As I mentioned in our informational meeting, we will now have a video played and a statement from Mayor Moore.
Good evening, Tyler Moore, 517 Tumbleweed Drive, Kokomo, Indiana, 46901. President Collins and council members, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I know the allotted time is probably 3 minutes. I'll apologize now because I'll probably go over. But I've prepared a statement to offer this evening. And again, I apologize if it will go over, but I wanted to stay. So again, President Collins, fellow council members and residents of Kokomo, either attending tonight's meeting or those viewing it remotely or viewing it later. Thank you for allowing me to spend some time now and send this video message in lieu of attending the meeting tonight in person. As many of you know, the city of Kokomo was fortunate to be selected as one of 16 communities across the United States chosen to participate in the Good Jobs, Great Cities Academy through the National League of Cities. And the kickoff meetings started today, Monday, in Washington, D.C. So I pray this brief video will afford me the opportunity to clear up many of the misunderstandings or wrongful assumptions that have been made and provide a better understanding of my point of view regarding these proposed projects by Advantix Development and the Kokomo Housing Authority. I also want to take a minute to applaud you, the members of the council, as well as the members of the Planning Commission for looking at these cases objectively, since again, the cases are specifically addressing the rezoning of the parcels and not determining the actual or eventual uses of each of the specific projects that may end up developed there. Those familiar to this process understand that there are more approvals to be required before anything is finalized. But I want to start first with a little disclaimer. This recorded message is in no way meant to be taken as an attempt to encourage or force any member of the Kokomo Common Council to vote one way or another on any of tonight's cases or to change his or her mind regarding the same. Likewise, this is not an attempt to force those who may be opposed to any of tonight's cases to change their minds regarding the same. It is simply an attempt to convey my thoughts on the issues at hand, especially the proposed property at 301 or 3109 West Sycamore, and to clear up some of the misconceptions that have formulated and misinformation that has been assumed. However, if any individual has a change of mind, a change of opinion, or even a change of heart because of my message, then that will be attributable to someone else's influence. So a quick background check of where my administration's come with the Housing Authority's RAD conversion since I initially took office in 2020 will show that I first became aware of the RAD conversion process, which Mr. Steele has described in previous meetings, early on in January 2020. I was brought up to speed on this three-phase process focused on transitioning the current KHA's public housing units into developer partnerships at HUD's directive, which included learning that the Garden Square property would be the third and last phase of this process. Because the first two phases of the conversion were well underway, we understood that eventually the primary goals of the Garden Square phase of this RAD was to improve the housing quality provided and decrease the density of the footprint for those residents. Fast forwarding to today's rezoning cases, I believe that the properties identified at 1411 North Market, 3109 West Sycamore, and the 28 select scattered sites meet the goals of the RAD program and will result in the betterment of the lives of the residents and provide a good solution to the current situation. But as we've all asked, why did Advantix ultimately select these particular sites? And are they the best locations for these developments? Only time will tell. And I'm staying optimistic that in time, it will prove to be right. And by clearing up a few things, providing some of my own insight, I'll explain why I feel strongly about this. I know many of you on the council have spent time with your constituents on the phone, in text messages, and via email. So I know that you have heard what is being spread. I too have listened to concerned residents regarding this matter. In fact, I want to pause and thank Mr. Bagwell, who is one of the main spokespersons for the entire West Side remonstrance, for copying and sharing a number of our text exchanges in which I welcomed and encouraged my fellow neighbors to reach out directly to me with questions and concerns. This afforded me the opportunity then to directly clear up a few misconceptions on the project while discovering that not everyone was opposed to the proposed project as some were led to believe, or were as opposed to the proposed project as some were led to believe. Now, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of individuals opposed to a portion of this phase of the conversion being located on the west side of Kokomo, some even as far as 2 to 5 miles away from the proposed site. But it was reassuring to know that not everyone is opposed to this. With that in mind, here's a list of what I know to be most of the misconceptions and misinformation being shared, again, specifically with the West Sycamore site. 1, the entire Garden Square complex is being located on the West Sycamore site. This is obviously untrue and has been explained in previous meetings. Only 48 units now will be located at that site. Number 2, these developments are adding more HUD housing units or government units to Kokomo and will bring even more people to our city. This is also untrue. The proposed units only replace those currently in our city. Number 3, the proposed development will butt up right against the properties on West Carter Street. This is untrue, as there are 17 acres of farm ground owned by a different property owner that separates the neighborhood from the proposed development. Number 4, the city of Kokomo directed Advantex to this property or is forcing them to choose this site for development. This is untrue as well. Advantex worked with KHA leadership to identify proposed sites and then approach the city for assistance in obtaining information on said properties, compiling necessary information for various applications, and eventually finalizing the filing process. All that occurred prior to any remonstrance being known. In fact, one of the first sites selected was the old Cutler Park on the east side of town where Eastside Ballpark used to be. But due to deed restrictions from PPG, when it was originally transferred to the city, that property was removed as an option. Number 5, all individuals that live in government subsidized housing units are criminals or drug dealers or have violent tendencies. And because of this, single elderly residents will be the first targets of criminal behavior. Also untrue. While every community has its issues, as does Kokomo, this claim is a gross misrepresentation of the community as a whole. While the majority of those individuals and families in need of this assistance in our community are hardworking, law-abiding residents and should not be punished for the sins of the few. Number 6, the residents at these new sites would not have adequate access to services and transit they might need. Although this is an initial challenge, I have committed resources to help with a safe pathway to help serve the residents at each of the sites, or wherever the proposed developments may end up, just as the city would commit to assist other housing projects in similar situations. And actually, with our current housing shortage, we'll be planning on a number of potential improvements throughout the city. Number 7, these developments will cost the city more money in police and fire protection and thus raise our taxes. Untrue. Property taxes are based on property assessments and capped by state law. Also, the state sets a specific growth quotient under which the city must operate. Plus, city police and fire services are already provided at the current location of Garden Square. So relocating the residents to the Market Street, scattered sites, and West Sycamore locations produce no additional demand on those departments, especially since they are within the city limits and are, again, not adding to the total count of KHA or government subsidized housing units. Number 8, my administration and many members of the Common Council have to be receiving some type of monetary incentive or kickbacks in order to vote this through. This is so far from being true. I've been told that in other communities, the rich pay to keep these developments from occurring where they don't want them. But I can assure you that not one person in the city of Kokomo government is engaging in that kind of activity. Those that believe that to be the case do not truly know me, nor the outstanding character of each member of this council, and should be embarrassed for even thinking so. There are a few other arguments involving property values and, again, single elderly neighbors being targeted, but I would encourage folks to do the research like I have, to read articles and reports that can positively speak to that. Yet after all that, I realize the 2 main questions actually remain, and they are the ones I posed earlier in my message. Why did Advantex select these sites, or specifically the West Sycamore site? And are these the best locations for these developments? Again, more specifically, the Sycamore site. Many have mentioned how other locations would better serve the Garden Square residents and have provided a few other properties that have been identified as better than the Sycamore site. I hope by now everyone has had time to understand the complexity of what is being proposed and may see that some sites are either not within Advantix's budgets for the projects, not as well connected to amenities, and or may not even be for sale. We are told that these sites all check the boxes and fit within the scope of the desired projects. But what I would like to offer are some thoughts or observations regarding the potential appropriateness of the West Sycamore site. When I first heard that West Sycamore was in the running as a potential site for Garden Square's conversion, I too wondered if it was a good fit. But as I began to look at the distance to amenities and services, the properties in somewhat close proximity, and what all I have heard and read from folks, I realized that maybe it just might work. There is a man much wiser than me that made the statement earlier last week. God doesn't work in mysterious ways. He works in intentional ways. I see 3 churches all within 1/10 of a mile from the West Sycamore site, churches that I'm confident look for outreach opportunities. I see Ascension Hospital less than a mile away from the site, whose mission statement begins, and I quote, "Rooted in the loving ministry of Jesus as a healer, we commit ourselves to serving all persons with special attention to those who are poor and vulnerable." I see neighborhoods to the south of the site that are full of individuals that boast of giving money to nonprofits who provide much needed services and extra tips to hardworking service providers. Neighborhoods whose HOA leaderships met once, if not twice, out across America to discuss this proposed project. For those that aren't aware of Cross America's mission, they are committed to, quote, "sending a cross and path to salvation to every home in America," end quote. And they also mentioned in their faith statement that they, quote, "believe that the gift of salvation is available to all," end quote. If God's not speaking to us through all this, I don't know who is. I was challenged by one of the spokespersons of the West Side to step up and start leading Kokomo because so far no one has seen it. He followed that up with a reminder that I was elected to change the direction Kokomo was heading. Because other communities shy away from planning low-income developments in what I will say unconventional and unexpected areas of their cities, the possibility of allowing a small portion of this final rad conversion to be placed here shows the world that Kokomo does think in a different direction and that maybe something greater is at play here. Again, only time will tell, but I'm confident that my neighbors and I will work to prove the critics wrong. Again, I'm not trying to change any minds or opinions. I'm simply trying to lead from where I am and to serve everyone in Kokomo as best I can. As Kokomo's mayor and as a neighbor to one of the proposed locations, I believe that these rezoning cases on all the sites should collectively be supported for the potential use and betterment of the Garden Square rad conversion. Thank you all for your time. Again, I apologize for going over, Mr. President. I wish you all the best of luck in your decisions, and may God continue to bless Kokomo.
I think now we'll move on to, I don't know if Mr. Reckler or Mr. Faber will come.
Good evening. My name is Dick Sandburn, 739 Riverview Drive in Kokomo. I have my thoughts typed out here, and I'm going to read them. Not exactly sure how long it's going to take, but I would ask that you allow me the time to read the entire 2.5-page document. And I'll give you a packet as soon as I finish. First off, my personal thanks to each one of you for serving the citizens of Kokomo like you do. It's a tremendous responsibility. And contentious issues like this that are uncomfortable and they call for unprecedented wisdom and courage. That's what I'm asking from you tonight. I emailed a list of 12 questions to each council member on Sunday, July 2nd, regarding the 3109 West Sycamore rezoning. Several of you responded. A couple of you took time to even meet in person, and I greatly appreciated that. And there's some I'm still waiting to hear from. The overall response from the members I met with was, our job is the narrow scope of voting if this property can be rezoned. In essence, they dismissed my questions. Several of the questions centered on whether changing the zoning for 3109 West Sycamore is in the best interest of the tenants and the citizens of Kokomo. And it's safe to assume that it's in the best interest of Advantix, which is fine because that's part of the process. But just because they ask doesn't mean it's best. None of the council members I've spoken with have an understanding of why this property was selected, and they have no justification for why it would be in the best interest of the tenants and the citizens of Kokomo. For a council member to declare, our job is the narrow scope of voting if this property can be rezoned, is not only very passive and dismissive, but almost a forsaking of your duties. Voting yes without understanding is unwise, and what appears to be a lack of due diligence should compel you to vote no. But let's assume you depended on the Planning Commission to conduct your due diligence, and you're basing your vote on their favorable recommendation. The final question I asked each of you was, what needs to be true for you to vote no on this proposal on rezoning 3109 West Sycamore? And I received the exact same answer from the council members that responded. They said, new information. Frankly, if you'd answered the other 11 questions, it would have provided you with that new information that would lead you to vote no. On page 12 of the City of Kokomo Zoning Ordinance Manual, it lists, quote, a summary of powers and duties for the Plan Commission, unquote. In section 1.16, item N states, enforce regulations and procedures of the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision control ordinance to the extent of the local resolutions, ordinances, and state of Indiana law. That same manual states that, quote, duties should be interpreted as activities that are obligations. So, in short, not surprisingly, the Planning Commission has the obligation of enforcing regulations and procedures, and they didn't do that. As you know, the Planning Commission office generated a staff report that ended with a favorable recommendation of rezoning 3109 West Sycamore. And it's understandable why you would take the report's recommendation at face value. So a question, how familiar are you with how or why the Planning Commission arrived at their favorable recommendation? The Planning Commission's own staff report states, according to the City of Kokomo Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map, 3109 West Sycamore Road is located in an area proposed for general commercial. General commercial is an area that accommodates a wide variety of large and small scale commercial uses. Typically, this category is for commercial uses that cater to vehicle traffic with high visibility from major roadways. Do multifamily units fit this description? Do you think of apartment building when you hear large and small scale commercial uses, or commercial uses that cater to vehicle traffic with high visibility from major roadways? No, of course you don't. When the city plan is to strive to attract lots of vehicles and traffic, you don't think of apartment buildings being the best use. This development not only conflicts with the comprehensive land use map, it runs counter to it. There's no justification for why 3109 West Sycamore is the best location for this development beyond because Advantix asked. No council member I've spoken with has provided any reasoning whatsoever for why rezoning this property to M3 is in the best interest of the tenants and of the citizens of Kokomo. And this alone is reason enough to vote no. But again, I understand why you would take the report's recommendation at face value, but you shouldn't and you can't. That same planning commission report also states, according to the city of Kokomo zoning ordinance, the M3 zoning district is compatible with all adjoining property zones except the AR and R1 zoning district. However, several existing lots currently zoned as AR and R1 surround this lot. All adjoining property zones consist of 7 parcels. 5 parcels that actually touch 3109 West Sycamore and 2 parcels across the highway. All 5 of the adjacent properties are zoned either AR or R1. And the report makes it clear that these are incompatible with M3 zoning. So a more accurate description for the report should be the M3 zoning district is incompatible with all the adjoining property zones except for the C2 and IS properties across the highway. At best, at the very best, this phrasing is extremely misleading. The Planning Commission's own report shows that you should vote no because the zones are incompatible. So we know for a fact from the Planning Commission staff report that the adjoining properties of 3109 West Sycamore, except for the ones across the highway, are incompatible with M3 zoning. But let's look beyond the next door neighbors. Let's look a half mile out in all directions. What do we find? We find there's approximately 566 individual parcels, 473 on the south side of the highway and 93 on the north side of the highway. Of all the 566 parcels, there are 4 parcels that are zoned M2. How many are zoned M3? Exactly 0. The vast majority of the other 562 parcels are zoned AR and R1. The very zones that the commission report says are incompatible with M3 zoning. The Planning Commission did not fulfill their duty to, quote, enforce regulations and procedures of the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision control ordinance. Voting yes when you know it's incompatible with zoning regulations is irresponsible. I'm not an attorney, but changing the zoning to M3 when it clearly conflicts with the zoning ordinance sure seems like it would be illegal. Some attorneys would call that an arbitrary and capricious decision. But I think it's fair to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume you didn't know about this. I know there are good men and women on this council, and I don't believe there's anything nefarious going on. I think you relied on the Planning Commission to do their job, and they failed you. They threw it over the wall to you, and now it's your responsibility to correct it. I had asked each of you what needs to be true for you to vote no. The answer I got from those I heard from was new information. Well, you got it. This is your new information. And now that you know, the only thing you can do with it is to vote no. Thank you.
Sandberg?
Disappointed, I didn't hear my name. I didn't hear my name. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Dick.
This is our zoning ordinance. The planning commission's wrong. It's appropriate. It's appropriate.
My name is Tom Reflake. I live at 732 Lakeside Drive in Kokomo, Indiana, 46901. Can I approach and pass this out real quick, right?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Please.
So
You ought to run for office. I think you ought to run for office. Everybody's here.
Yes, the question that I'm going to ask today, I didn't email or talk to anybody except Greg. He left the room. So, and the only thing that I told Greg is no matter what happens to Greg, we're still going to be friends. We always have been and we always will be. And that's the way I feel about the council. But I got to ask you a question. Are you 100% sure about this piece of property and this project? And if you're not, I'm talking about 100%. If you're not, you need to vote no. You know, we listened to the mayor speak a little bit. You know, hope is not a strategy. The only way to make a government good is to make it responsible to the people. That's from President Thomas Jefferson. Council members, when you took this office, you took an oath. The oath to faithfully discharge all your official duties. Those duties include ensuring the safety, security of citizens to the city of Kokomo, maintaining and enhancing a higher quality of life. Now, when you took your oath, you took on the burden of making a good and often difficult decisions as representative of your constituents. This is not only about rezoning issue, but a large problem that we all need to solve. KHA is led by Derek Steele. He's trying to make the best of an inherited position. He has a dilapidated Garden Square or Gateway Gardens built as a bunker in the 1940s and wants to make the best for his residents. To make matters worse, HUD cut funding and wants to convert these subsidized properties through the RAD program. He's so dedicated to his cause that his RAD program will essentially alleviate the need for KHA, except for the administration of vouchers after completion of his goal. You also have Advantech, led by Tim Martin, who's in the business to converting these properties through the RAD program. Tim isn't a bad person. I introduced myself to him today. For making the request for to develop this property into apartments is simply trying to solve an ongoing issue. And though I adamantly disagree with this particular placement, I don't believe there was any malintentions behind his request. A few weeks ago, which is the toughest part of me talking, I was able to tell you my experience about whether Kokomo attracting people from Chicago and Detroit who are less than admirable through its public housing. As you may or may not be aware, a gang war between Detroit and Chicago reveals that it started as an armed robbery involving drugs at Garden Square, result in the death of my daughter. The toughest part of me talking. The robbery was not immediately reported to the police because the tenant was afraid of being evicted due to the drugs in the house. The story explains the lack of crime reporting, the underreporting of the severity of the crime, and the rumor that Garden Square attracts drug dealers and gang members from Detroit and Chicago. My story may be an outlier or an anomaly, but I believe it's unfair to outright dismiss the concerns of those people here tonight. They have a right to be nervous about these apartments. Many have first-hand experiences of other crimes that occurred when another similar complex was placed nearby. That being said, I believe that everyone needs someone to believe in them. I believe in the income assisted housing, just not on this piece of property. The issue of out-of-town drug dealers and gang members, the issue of low HUD funding, and the issue of ongoing maintenance are separate, but related issues that we as a community need to solve. They are relevant to the big picture. Let's give critical thought to our developments before implementing them. And Dick just touched on it 2 minutes ago. On the flip side of this problem is the proposed solution, the Sagamore Springs apartment complex. This is being presented as a short-term solution to the dilapidated Garden Square property. The catch is that if not immediately, then the deadline for the RAD conversion will be missed. I feel we are making a quick decision that needs to be thought out. This proposed solution does not come without consequences. First, the property will require modified trolley routes, sidewalks through the owner's front yard who are opposed to the development. The relocation of a wraparound service that are already located near Gateway Gardens. Solving these issues will take not only money, but also property from our taxpayers. It will also create a higher burden on the city administration. What are the long-term financial consequences on the tax base of this relocation? Should these issues be resolved before we rezone the property? And the answer is yes, they should be resolved. Second, the property will consist of 48 units on 5 acres of property. This is after the request for additional units were withdrawn. For Kokomo, the average family size is 2.92 or 3 people. To my best guess available, that's 144 people will be living on 5 acres partial, which is narrowed down further based upon setbacks, parking lots, and office buildings. Is this the number of units for this property too dense? And the answer is yes, it is too dense. Third, the property is currently zoned L1, light industrial. Dick just spoke about it. It established low-intensity business parks, distribution facilities, flex space, and non-hazardous outdoor storage. It will not affect what's surrounding it. Business park, distribution operations, standalone buildings. The proposed to switch to M3, a large-scale multifamily residential. This district is established for large size, medium to high density, multiple structure, multiple family development. Does M3 fit this piece of property? And the answer is no. The staff report shows that the M3 should be used for existing developments, which this is not an existing development, or carefully for the new residential development to protect the quality of life of tenants. Are we being careful about allowing this development? Are the consequences thought out? Keep in mind, I hope this survives. Hope is not a strategy. You have to strategize to figure that out. For one, this property will be high density. But is this land suitable for high density? And the answer is no. A downtown apartment complex would be within an already dense area, while this is surrounded by one storage facility, agriculture, and a quiet neighborhood with large lots and single homes. Look at page 2 of the staff report. It shows that it is not compatible with, Dick just talked about it, agricultural, low R1, which is very low density residential to the south, R1 to the east, and agricultural to the west. It is only compatible with the C2 to the north, which is located across the busy road. It also shows that the comprehensive plan calls for the land to be general, commercial, or wide variety of large and small scale commercial uses. These uses do not include high density housing. Next, the complex is far from the amenities, as shown on page 4. It is by itself on Sycamore Street. Other than the gas station, and the fire station, no other amenities are within a half a mile. And we are aware that many of the tenants will be required to walk. That was proven by the request for the parking variance on the BZA, which is the other meeting that I was at. Are apartments the highest and best use of this property? And the answer is no. As you're aware, we have a new battery factory coming to town in the very near future, which will lead to a boom in development and other businesses, including those that will be light industrial as currently zoned. Are we simply settling for the sake of development? We also need to consider the consequences of Garden Square, which has not been brought up. The cost simply to level the building will cost between 17 and 18 million dollars. This is without further development. Who will be the one to pay for it? What happens to that complex? Will it continue for years to become a vacant eyesore for this city? Who's going to maintain the property until it is demolished? KHA will essentially be a voucher administrator, as all the maintenance will be completed by Avantax. I realize we have a large problem that needs to be solved. I realize that if this is not passed tonight, then Avantax could miss their deadline to apply for the RAD conversion. I realize that. However, the consequences of your vote tonight will be felt for decades. The property will be developed and then utilized as apartments for decades to come. Let's not fit a square peg in a round hole for the sake of a quick decision. We can find a better property, one that is compatible with surrounding zonings, one that is close to the amenities, one that will allow a better quality of life for the tenants. We've had over 400 people that are willing to help and solve the problem of Kokomo. They've all showed up here. Kokomo has always worked together to help others in solving problems. Remember, the best decisions are made when you can see the big picture. Let's not get caught up in the short term and make a decision that we're going to regret later. We have to be not 99%. We have to be 100%. And remember, the government works for the people. And I ask you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruffin.
My name is Penny Snyder, and I live at 214 Lakeside Court, Kokomo 46901. And lucky for you guys, I'm not speaking tonight, but I do have some things if I can pass them out.
Sure.
Penny Snyder.
We'll ask.
Fire hydrant. No, I'll look for fire hydrant.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Here goes. Here, take it. I don't need it. I'll get one from them.
It's with the name. Big Mr. Sheeline. Mr. Greg Sheeline. Mr. Sheeline. You.
Greg Sheelan, Executive Director of the Copeland Howard Plan Commission. I didn't have any reason to speak tonight, but since my integrity has come under question, I cannot be quiet any longer. Comprehensive plan is a goal. It is not the law. It is a goal that planning goes by. That doesn't mean it has to fit everything in its entirety. Compatible zonings. There's no place in the zoning ordinance that says to rezone a property, every zoning has to be compatible. There's no place in the ordinance that says that. What it does make us do, someone just said that we didn't do our due diligence. I refute that wholeheartedly. Myself and my staff have spent hours upon hours upon hours doing our due diligence on this case. And just because you don't like what the staff report says, does not mean that we did not do our due diligence. When there are not some compatible zonings, what that makes us do is it makes us look at the entire development closer, which we did that. You pull this up on Beacon, it's residential, folks. Ag R is agricultural residential. R1 is residential. There's M1, there's M2, there's institutional. A lot of the people in this room live in multifamily residential. This fits. It does fit. Whether you like it or not, it does fit. Someone said that there was no M3 zonings out there. There's good reason for that. The M3 zone was just put in place about 6 months ago. And the reason it was put in place is because we do have a housing shortage in our community. And we know, as Mr. Replick just said, with the battery plant coming, we're going to have hopefully more populated areas to come in and build homes. So the M3 zone gives us that affordability to have more homes or more apartments than what we have in the M2. That's why that was put in place. That's why there is no M3 zoning out there at this time, because it's only been in place for 6 months. In 2019, this same property, 3109 West Sycamore, was rezoned multifamily. I don't remember anybody being at the Plan Commission meeting contesting that at that time. In 2020, this same property, 3109 West Sycamore, was rezoned LI, low intensity industrial. I think Mr. Rethlick went over some of the permitted uses in LI, but I can also tell you one thing that was missed, not by my staff. In permitted uses, it says very high intensity retail. When you go to the Plan Commission, you look up the definition of very high intensity retail, there's lots of things that could go on 3109 West Sycamore as it's currently zoned that are probably far worse than what anybody's thinking that this could cause. Manufactured homes could be sold on that property. Farm equipment could be sold on that property because of that very high intensity retail. So if this was rezoned in 2019, multifamily, it fit in 2019, it fits in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone? I'm gonna allow. I have one more speaker here. We're gonna allow before we go to the vote. Hey, I would ask that you show the same respect when other people were speaking, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Paul Wyman, 211 Sandy Court, Kokomo, Indiana. I want to address this from a couple aspects. One, certainly the zoning. And then secondly, unfortunately, where I feel like the conversation has gone over the last month regarding this request. We are talking about residential zone. We're talking about residences. These are families that'll be living in apartments. Apartments are housing. This is a housing issue that we are talking about right now. It's not a secret. Advantex came out and said, here we are. This is what we want to do on this property. To Greg Sheeline's point, just a couple of years ago, this body rezoned this 3109 West Sycamore for an assisted living facility. Many people living on this property. Many people. Assisted living is housing. Single family units are housing. Apartments are housing. Everybody in our community deserves the opportunity to have housing. Gateway Gardens is housing. It's not as bad as what people want to come to this microphone and make it out to be.
Please.
I can only tell you that based on my personal experiences at Gateway Gardens. I've been there 8 times in the last 2 weeks. I can assure you in every one of those 8 visits, there was nothing nefarious happening. There weren't people outside acting crazy. I didn't witness drug deals going down. What I did witness was children playing. I did witness families barbecuing. I witnessed things that we all enjoy in our lives. And here's why I know it's not as bad as what people make it out to be. When the UAW lost their building in the tornado, they had every opportunity to move somewhere else, and they chose not to do it. They built a beautiful facility across the street from Gateway Gardens, and their membership is proud of that location. When the Humane Society decided to invest $1.5 million, $2 million in our community, they did it right across from Gateway Gardens. Many businesses who are located along Hoffer Street are operating and doing commerce every day with 0 problems from the families at Gateway Gardens. And so how I realize, and in listening over the last month, that this has become about people, not about zoning, is because just even our last city council meeting, the vote was 8-0 in favor of the project on Market Street. Across the street on Market Street from this proposed development, the same exact thing we're talking about at 3109 West Sycamore, are over 100 homes, like literally across the street. And on 2 other sides are businesses, operating businesses, virtually the same size acreage, but yet more apartments being proposed on that one than this one on Sycamore. And so how is it that it can't be about Advantix because they were fine for Market Street? It can't be about people coming from Chicago because not one person came to this microphone and said, "Dear God, we can't have more people come from Chicago and live on Market Street." It can't be about multifamily because we already were going to let an assisted living facility happen at this location. It can't be about businesses.
Please, guys, let him
It
finish.
can't be about
Thank you.
land size. So if it can't be about all those things, what is this really about? And I think we all in this room know what this has become about. And I sincerely hope and pray for the sake of our community tonight that we are not going to leave here with the message that those people can live on Market Street and they can live in Gateway Gardens, but you can't live here. That is the wrong message for Kokomo. And what I agree with many speakers have said about how we all love Kokomo and how Kokomo is this great welcoming place, and it is. Then in 2023, we shouldn't be saying to 175 families who are living in conditions substandard conditions that none of us would ever dream or let our family members live in. To say that we're going to just all of a sudden do away with this project tonight and for the next 3 to 5 years, because there will be nothing on the horizon to help the families in Gateway Gardens, subject them to those living conditions for another 3 to 5 years. This is our moment as a community to rise up and to say, come on, we're going to do this and we're all going to do it together. And we are going to show people that Kokomo and Howard County rises up in these moments. And we do not pigeonhole people. We do not tell people you're not good enough to live here. And I'm thankful for the private investment of Advantix to come onto this location, build a $15 million home for these folks. And the minute they move in, here's what I can tell you. The dignity of these families' lives will begin to rise, living in beautiful housing like we all get to every day. Because the dignity of lives of these individuals is no less than any single person in this room. I have laid out for you how this has become about people. I ask you to bring it back to zoning. This is about housing. And we have 175 people in our community right now that are living in conditions that are deplorable. We owe it to them to, on the west side, take this small piece of the entire project to get them into a better life. We owe it to them. They deserve it. That's what I really believe about Kokomo, Indiana. I urge you to vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, come on, guys. Come on. We know with no new information coming forth, we have a motion and a second for passage of ordinance 7088 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Would ask the clerk call roll, please.
Capshaw,
Nay.
Nicklick,
Nay.
Delon. Aye. Tony Stewart,
Aye.
Roger Stewart,
Aye.
Matt Griecu,
Aye.
Greg Davis,
Aye.
Kara McKibben. Ray Collins,
Aye.
6-3.
Motion carries 6-3. I would now give you guys an opportunity to if you want to leave the chambers where we can conduct business. Thank you, and do that quietly, please. I mean. Go ahead and start back up with our meeting this evening. I would ask the clerk to read ordinance 7087 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7087 is P 07Z23 is the petition of James O'Neill requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property described in the Mott's Gathers edition as 1110 North Apperson Way.
Councilman Riku.
Please shut the door.
Mr. President, ordinance 7087 is a petition of James O'Neill for a change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 1110 North Apperson Way. I move for approval on second reading.
I second.
Do we have anyone to speak to this communication from the audience? What's that? I'm asking, is there anyone to speak to ordinance 7087? Councilman Riku.
Mr. President, to repeat, ordinance 7087 is a petition of James O'Neill requesting a change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 1110 North Apperson Way.
We have a second. Is there anyone here to speak to ordinance 7087? We have a motion and a second to pass ordinance 7087 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now I ask the clerk to read ordinance 7083 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7083, where it has been determined that it is now necessary to appropriate money in accordance with the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund.
Councilman Miklick.
Mr. President, I move that we put on the floor ordinance 7083.
Second.
Councilman Miklick.
Mr. President, this ordinance is moving the funds for the purchase of a payloader into the highway fund in the amount of $206,740. The street department has had this ordered since 2019. Due to the pandemic, it was never built or completed, but it is now. So therefore, it is necessary to move the funds to pay for it into the appropriate account. Therefore, I would move that we adopt ordinance 7083.
Second.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7083? We have a motion and a second to pass ordinance 7083 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I would ask the clerk to read ordinance 7090 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7090 is case P10Z23 is the petition of Advantex Development Corporation requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property more commonly known as 1312 North Market Street, Kokomo.
Councilman Riku.
Mr. President, ordinance 7090 is a petition of Advantex Development Corporation for a change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential. Property located at 1312 North Market Street. I would move for passage of ordinance 7090 on second reading.
I second.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7090? You have a motion and a second for passage of ordinance 7090 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Capshaw,
Aye.
Miklick,
Aye.
Galon. Aye. Riku,
Aye.
Tony Stewart,
Aye.
McKibben. No. Roger Stewart,
Aye.
Greg Davis,
Aye.
Collins.
Aye.
8-1.
Motion carries 8-1. I would now ask the clerk to read ordinance 7091 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7091 is case P11Z23, is the petition of Advantex Development Corporation requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property commonly known as 908 North Portland Avenue, Kokomo.
Councilman Grieco.
Mr. President, ordinance 7091 is a petition to Advantage Development Corporation for change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 908 North Portland Avenue. I would move for passage of ordinance 7091 on second reading.
A second.
Second.
Is there anyone here to speak to ordinance 7091? We have a motion and a second for passage of ordinance 7091 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Capshaw,
Aye.
Micklick,
Aye.
Delon. Aye. Ricchio,
Aye.
Tony Stewart,
Aye.
McKibben. Roger Stewart,
Aye.
Greg Davis,
Aye.
Collins.
Aye.
1.
Motion carries 8-1. I would now ask the clerk to read ordinance 7092 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7092 is case P12Z23, is the petition of Advantex Development Corporation requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property more commonly known as 1051 East Richmond Street, Kokomo.
Councilman Grieco.
Mr. President, ordinance 7092 is a petition of Advantage Development Corporation for a change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 1051 East Richmond Street. I move for passage of ordinance 7092 on second reading.
Second.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7092? We have a motion and a second to pass ordinance 7092 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Capshaw,
Aye.
Micklick,
Aye.
Delon. Aye. Ricchio,
Aye.
Tony Stewart,
Aye.
McKibben. Roger Stewart,
Aye.
Greg Davis,
Aye.
Collins.
Aye. Motion carries 8-1. I would now ask the clerk to read ordinance 7093 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7093 is case P13Z23, is the petition of Advantex requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property located at 1215 North Purdom Street, Kokomo.
Councilman Grieco.
Mr. President, ordinance 7093 is a petition of Advantage Development Corporation for a change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 1215 North Purdom Street. I would move for passage of ordinance 7093 on second reading.
For a second.
Second.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7093? We have a motion for passage of ordinance 7093 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Capshaw,
Aye.
Micklick,
Aye.
Delon. Aye. Ricchio,
Aye.
Tony Stewart,
Aye.
McKibben. Roger Stewart,
Aye.
Greg Davis,
Aye.
and Collins.
Aye.
8-1.
Motion carries 8-1. I would now ask the clerk to read ordinance 7094 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7094 is case P14Z23. It's a petition of Advantex Corporation requesting the Kokomo City Plan Commission petition and recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property located at 312 North Burton Street, Kokomo.
Councilman Riku.
Mr. President, ordinance 7094 is a petition of Advantage Development Corporation for a change in zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 312 North Fordham Street. I move for passage of ordinance 7094 on second reading.
I second.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7094? We have a motion for passage of ordinance 7094 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ask the clerk to please call roll.
Capshaw.
Aye.
Pickwick.
Aye.
Delon. Aye. Ricky.
Aye.
Tony Stewart.
Aye.
McKibben. No. Roger Stewart.
Aye.
Greg Davis.
Aye.
Collins.
Aye. Motion carries 8-1. Now ask the clerk to read ordinance 7095 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7095 is case P15Z23. Is the petition of Advantex Development Corporation requesting the Kokomo City Planning Commission petition recommended to the Kokomo Common Council for a change in zone classification from an R4 to an R5 for property described as Kirkpatrick and Scott's addition, or commonly known as 1318 North Wabash Street, Kokomo.
Councilman Riku.
Mr. President, ordinance 7095 is a petition of Advantage Development Corporation for change of zone classification from R4 urban residential to R5 urban residential for property located at 1318 North Wabash Street. I move for passage of ordinance 7095 on second reading.
I second.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7095? We have a motion for passage of ordinance 7095 on second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Capshaw.
Aye.
Nicklick.
Aye.
Delon. Aye. Ricky.
Aye.
Tony Stewart.
Aye.
Aaron McKibben. Roger Stewart.
Aye.
Greg Davis.
Aye.
Ray Collins.
Aye.
8-1.
Motion carries 8-1. I would now ask the clerk to read ordinance 7096 by title only, please.
Ordinance 7096 is an ordinance designating a property located at 1610 West Taylor Street, Kokomo, Indiana, as a historic site in the city of Kokomo.
Councilwoman DeLong.
Mr. President, ordinance 7096 is Gregory Steele and Margaret Phillips. They are owners at 1610 West Taylor Street, Kokomo, Indiana. And they've made the application to the Historic Review Board to make this a historic site. And the review board approved the historic designation of this house based on architectural merit. Mr. President, I move for suspension of the rules and pass ordinance 7096 on first and second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules to pass ordinance 7096 on first and second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilwoman DeLong.
Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance 7096 on second reading.
Anyone here to speak to ordinance 7096?
Harry Tater Roach, 1300 East Lordeman. I just want to know why it's an old house or something, why it's
It was built in 1959, but what made it historic was the architectural merit. So the house has merit with the architecture.
Where's it located again?
1610 West Taylor Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to ordinance 7096? We have a motion and a second.
Don't have a second.
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 We did.
Now we do.
Now you do.
Now we have a second.
You got two of them.
Second.
third.
We have a
Third,
motion and a
right.
second to pass
Billy.
ordinance 7096 on first and second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That concludes our business for this evening. Our next meeting will be held July 24th at 6 p.m. with an informational meeting at 5:30. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Have a good evening.
Ray Collins will be here for the next hour. Signing.